Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the program Say It Like It Is. And I indicated to all of you the purpose of this program is to talk about issues, no matter how sensitive they are. We're living at a time when the ummah is bleeding, our families are dysfunctional, but of course there are many good examples of good families, good fathers, good mothers, good children. So inshallah today it is really such an honor to speak to one of my favorite persons in the world, right? Maryam Lemu. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Uncle Idris, always a pleasure.
Alhamdulillah. Maryam, you know, for those who don't know you, I think everyone in South Africa knows you. She is from Nigeria. She is the beloved daughter of Sheikh Lemu and Sheikha Aisha Lemu. May Allah grant them the highest status in Jannah. And I had the good fortune of spending time with her parents and her family, and indeed a very, very noble family. So Maryam, you know, the issue I want to speak about, and I want to focus on this, is the whole issue of infidelity in marriages. And I know you do a lots of counseling. What has been your experience? Are the numbers increasing or they're decreasing?
The numbers are alarmingly increasing. It's becoming commonplace. I find a lot of people beginning to have this attitude that it's the new normal when you get married. And wallahi, someone actually said it to me, Maryam, let's just accept our spouses are going to cheat on us. And I was like, how? How do you want me to accept that this is something that is going to be okay, something that is haram, something that has a grave consequence in the eyes of Allah in the life to come? And you tell me this is part of the package of the institution of marriage today. So for me, I absolutely agree with you that the ummah is bleeding, because the ummah starts with the home. It starts with the values and what children are seeing. And the dysfunction, if people feel infidelity is going to be something that is acceptable, and children are growing up seeing one or the other parent miserable because of the lack of loyalty, lack of fidelity, then definitely I think it's time for a huge wake-up call for us to try and nip this in the bud, if it's possible to put this thing back in a box, to try and make sure people understand, you know, the moral implications, the social implications, the damage it does, and the domino effect it has in the family and in the ummah. We really have to wake up.
Yeah, so Maryam, a question, I know it's theoretical, but I'm sure you came across this. I'm giving you a scenario of a couple that have come to you, and it could be in either spouse. Of course, we are not saying that the men are the only perpetrators of infidelity. Of course, they are committing infidelity with someone from the opposite sex. Now, the question to ask you is, a woman comes to you, and she comes, her husband recognizes he has done wrong, and he wants to also see a counselor. They come to you, and she's distraught. She feels very, very upset, and the husband appears to be remorseful. Now, and she says she doesn't know what to do, you know, because she cannot get over this image she has in the mind of the other person, and the trust has been eroded. What kind of steps would you take them through, you know?
Well, it's important we recognize that once this covenant, this contract that we underwent with Allah has been broken, it's almost impossible to ever see things will go back to being normal. Because you will find the spouse that has been betrayed is always on a high alert. They are paranoid. They're always wondering, is this still going on? There's always going to be suspicion. It's going to be really, really hard. And it would take someone who has mastered the art of effective apology, if they are sincere. Let me emphasize that. Some people have mastered the art of manipulation and can give you the textbook, code of how to make an effective apology. However, if someone is in that situation, I often use the metaphor of a glass dish that breaks. No matter what you do to put it back together, it'll never be the same. So that's the reality. But can you put the pieces together, however, in many pieces it is shattered? Yes, with patience, with perseverance. The first thing is understand that your feelings are valid. Your emotions, the feeling of betrayal are real. And yes, you do feel these emotions, and your spouse who has gotten themselves involved, who has betrayed this trust, needs to recognize that you are hurting. They've taken something away from you. They've broken a covenant with you, them, and Allah. And they need to, first of all, admit it. They need to come clean. They need to say, I messed up and I am sorry. And they need to show genuine remorse that this is something I will never do again. I understand what I've done to you. I understand what I've done to this family, to this relationship. I know it's going to be hard for you to forgive me, but I promise you I'm going to work on this. And they need to first identify what made them do it in the first place. Because if they don't, the triggers are still there. And unless you have dealt with how to handle the triggers, then infidelity will most likely repeat itself. You can say sorry till the cows come home, but if you haven't found a way to either remove yourself, sometimes it's because you move around with bad friends, sometimes it's what you watch on your devices that plant seeds that you feel these fantasies must be brought to life. You have to identify what made you do it. Is it unresolved issues in your relationship? Are there unsatisfied or unmet needs? Your spouse may not be fulfilling your fantasies, or you haven't expressed them. And a lot of marriages that end up in divorce, one of the root causes amongst many is unexpressed expectations. So have you actually, done the heavy lifting of investing in the relationship, effective communication, in effective expression of what your needs, wants, and fantasies are? And then is your spouse, and this is another reason I can say why some people end up going into infidelity, is they haven't dealt with the problems they are facing. And sometimes it's an easy way out to just go and quench their intimacy needs and then just come back and go through the grind of marriage. So if there are unresolved issues between you and your spouse, have you addressed it? So it's not just a Band-Aid you put on a wound. It's not going to heal. Literally, you are just putting a Band-Aid on a wound that is septic. So you must start with going to the root cause of the problem, address it, then acknowledge your fault and own your truth, apologize, be sincere, ask Allah to help you, let your spouse see genuine effort and intention in stopping this habit or whatever, the betrayal that you did, and then ask your spouse to support you and guide you. But you have to also be patient and understand that if they don't forgive you in a year or 2 years, they are allowed to do that. You can't rush forgiveness. It's based on their terms, and you have to make enough effort to make them know, I'm never going to do this again. I am so sorry I did this. And hopefully with time, if you've decided this is a relationship worth working on with enough dua, inshallah, you'll be able to start rebuilding a relationship, hopefully on solid ground.
Maryam, there are so many nuggets of wisdom that you have shared. And I know when I interact with some of the couples, you find often the man says that, I've turned to Allah, I'm remorseful, I told my wife I'm sorry, but every now and then she brings up the topic and they become very, very impatient. And I mean, what do you tell such a person? How do you make him understand what you have done is so damaging, and it does in the end erode the self-esteem of the wife?
It's very shattering on a man or a woman. My husband and I recently, in the past 6 months, dealt with a case where it was the husband who came to us and said he suspects. And so he brought his wife to the table, and during discussions, we were able to discover this is what happened. Again, I repeat, you can't rush I'm sorry. You can't force your spouse to accept. There is this quote that I love that says, a satisfied need no longer wants. So if your spouse is satisfied that you've understood why they are hurt, why it's aching, why it's hard for them to let go, then if you make sure they get that you get it, then most likely the door starts to open for healing to begin. So again, it goes back to how remorseful are you? How sorry are you? How sincere are you in your intentions and your seen efforts to fight your nafs and your weaknesses and fight shaitan and make sure this doesn't happen again? You have to gain their trust.
Maryam, I have to stop you there. It's the first segment is over, and I'm enjoying every bit of it. May Allah bless you. Yeah, we are talking. Well, by the way, the program is Say It Like It Is, and our guest is one of the beautiful personalities I know, Maryam Lemu from Nigeria. She is a relationship coach. She is many, many things. And we're speaking about infidelity. And we need to look at it deeply, understand the dynamics and the psychology. And we'll be back immediately after this break. Welcome back to our program, Say It Like It Is. And we're talking to Maryam Lemu. I'm sure you are enjoying the program as I always do, listening to my beautiful sister, Maryam. Maryam, you know the issue, you were chatting about this. And one of the things that I know I try to do is to tell the victim of the infidelity, let us say in this case it's the wife, I tell her, don't be too hard with yourself. Don't blame yourself. You cannot accept responsibility for what he has done. I'm not saying there aren't things that can improve in the marriage. So how do you reassure the woman in that case when she's so hard with herself, blames herself, and she really feels that self-esteem is completely eroded?
I think you hit the nail on the head, Uncle Idris. Many women in particular feel it's all about them. We've counseled couples over the past 25 years who, by the time you identify what was the root cause of the problem, it's from the spouse's childhood trauma. Imagine, it had nothing to do with you. And then in other cases, like I mentioned earlier, you also have where it's due to what they are watching. It had nothing to do with you because they were addicted to porn. And there was no way you, poor girl, could ever bring their fantasies to life because they are watching professional actors do take one, take two, take 20, and nobody gets to see the ones that drop on the editing floor and the gross behind the scenes of pornography. They just see the bedroom acrobatics and they think, oh, my spouse should be able to do this. And when they can't, they now go out seeking fulfillment elsewhere to bring their fantasies to life. So absolutely, I agree with you. You need to be kind to yourself. You need to be gentle on yourself. Otherwise, your self-esteem will be shattered and it had absolutely nothing to do with you. You have to recognize that. And even if you behaved badly, it is important that your spouse draws your attention to your shortcomings so that you have a discussion, you recognize those things you're doing that is displeasing to them and that's turning them off of you, and work on that. But that is still no justification for someone to be involved in any form of infidelity, because at the end of the day, the contract with Allah and you is they would be loyal. They would be fidelity. They are loyal to you, to the institution of marriage, to the children. And they're going to have to answer to Allah if they violate that trust. So it's bigger than you. Often my husband says, don't say he cheated on me. He cheated himself because he has done something that is going to be affecting his relationship with his Rabb. So you need to also just take your foot off the pedal and stop being so self-deprecating and thinking it's all you. I absolutely agree with what you said, Uncle Idris.
You know, if you look at that reality in terms of the woman who now feels so betrayed, and is it important who she speaks to about her issue? She might speak to some friends who might have gone through a similar experience and who might tell her, you know what, don't waste your time, go for counseling, do what I did. I just left the marriage. And you hear all kinds of stories, right? So, I mean, what should she do? What kind of advice should she get? Who should she turn to? Of course, you turn to Allah first, because Allah is a person with whom you're able to offload. He's a healer of hearts. I mean, that's a very important aspect. What are your suggestions here?
Definitely be very careful who you take those kind of intimate, very private issues to. And I think anything related to your relationship with your spouse, be very, very careful and selective with whom you share this with. I use the example that sometimes we're upset with our spouse and we vent to our family members. Later on, we make amends and we are fine, we've moved on, but our loved ones will still hold on to those things that we told them. And unfortunately, it then damages their relationship with the in-laws. The same applies to your friends. If you divulge this thing, which is very private, it's actually something between you and your spouse and Allah. In this particular case, I would say definitely, if you are having difficulty addressing the issue to your satisfaction, in other words, your spouse is not getting why you are so angry or why you're not forgiving, why you're not letting go of this, then seek professional help. Obviously, like you, Uncle Idris, this is something you deal with all the time. You've been counseling couples for decades, and you are seasoned, you are experienced, and you have the best interest of the couple at heart. And you look at this objectively as an outsider looking in and, saying, hey, I think you are at fault. And you call out those where each spouse made a mistake, and you get them to acknowledge and then give them the steps on how to move forward. This requires skill. This requires wisdom. This requires a fear for Allah, and you're rooting for the success of the marriage. You're not biased. So for me, I feel the first thing is be very careful who you share it with, but you did say take it first to Allah. Do so. But then find and seek counsel from professionals, people, and there are many out there. Alhamdulillah, there are so many professional Muslim relationship experts who can guide you in how to navigate. And I feel once your spouse is trying to make amends and apologize, this is where you can, at the negotiating table, say, on the condition that we get counseling. I mean, so that you are not left to your own element to try and navigate the difficulty of this period. So you can say, I will consider it on the condition that we sit together and speak to a professional. If they are genuinely remorseful and they are sincere in their apology, they would want to agree to say, let me hear, let me reach out, let me get help if that's part of the deal. So definitely be careful and selective with who you take this kind of thing to.
And then you have...
can misguide you.
Yeah, no, alhamdulillah. Then you have this dynamic that the spouse will marry for 20 years, 25 years, sometimes even 30 years, 40 years, whatever. So they have, young adults as their children. Now, should you also get them to the counseling table? Because sometimes, if I'm just creating a fictitious scenario, you may have a son and a daughter. The son appears to be more, I won't say empathetic, but he gravitates towards the father, and he says the father made a mistake, whilst the daughter clings to her mother and she feels the pain of the mother. And she might say, you know what, Mommy, I think you should leave Daddy. And the son says, no, Mommy, I think you should remain in the marriage. I mean, should we get them involved in the counseling? Because they are also influences in the life of the family, are they not?
Absolutely. I think first I do try as much as possible to say, keep your children out of your mess. But in this scenario you made, you're talking about adults. And if it happens that they have found out, sometimes they see their mother bleeding, she's in a state of grief, and she can't hide. We're very expressive, we mothers, with our emotions, and we wear our emotions on our sleeves. So if we are sad, we're miserable, we're an emotional mess, our children will see it. And if they are older, sometimes it's easy for us to, lean onto them as a crutch because we are desperate for some kind of love in this kind of situation. Definitely, children will always be rooting for the success of the relationship of their parents because although when they are older, maybe the kind of dysfunction one would see in younger children may not be as easily, detectable in the older ones. But I think the advice I will give is do istikhara before you make any decision. If your children are saying, one is saying get a divorce, the other one is saying stay, I think let Allah guide you in navigating that. And at the end of the day, it's about you. It has nothing to do with the children. It's how Allah doesn't want you to stay in a relationship that's a good for nothing, going nowhere relationship for the sake of the children. Allah doesn't want you to set an example that accept, suffer in silence, be miserable, let infidelity happen. And that is the example your children are seeing in you because at the end of the day, they will tell Allah what example you set for them on what marriage is meant to look like. So you have to also be careful that you are going to be held accountable for what you modeled to your children. And if you teach your daughter who wants you to leave that you are going to stay, even when your husband has not owned his truth and shown remorse and proven that he's not going to do it again, then that's an example you have set for her that she should just, stay in the marriage for the sake of the children. So for me, I think try and keep children out of it as much as possible. But if they are involved and they are aware, then you have to be objective, be very prayerful, ask Allah for guidance, and decide what can I live with. If I cannot stand him anymore, I find him repulsive, I cannot close my eyes or be comfortable without checking his phone and wondering, where are you, close marking him, and you are in a constant state of anxiety, then I feel it's time to istihara and decide if this is, ask Allah to guide you, whether this is a relationship you should stay in. Otherwise, the worst of you will come out. You're going to be broken, you're going to be miserable, you're going to be anxious and a shell of who you are meant to be. And so for me, I feel, that's the best advice I would give.
Maryam, there you make, as usual, lots of beautiful points. And I also tell people that you do not stay in a marriage for the sake of your children. Sometimes, especially when the perpetrator often use that as a emotional blackmail. What about our children? They often do that. And children can be very, very resilient also. But I think it's important to know that once you get involved in these activities, it has very, very serious ramifications. Inshallah, we'll be back in the next segment, and we're talking to Maryam Lemu, all the way from Nigeria, about infidelity. And I'm really, really enjoying listening to her. I always learn from my beloved sister. Inshallah, we'll be back in a moment. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the program Say It Like It Is. And we are talking to Maryam Lemu with the sensitive topic about infidelity. Maryam, before I go on to another section, I remember reading this some years ago. When infidelity just happens, there is this trauma, this pain, this anger, disbelief. You behave irrationally. Often years later, after you have said goodbye, you look back and you say, you know what, my husband was okay, he made a big mistake and I should have been more forgiving. Why I'm sharing this with you, I came across with a number of women who left their husbands, and they interviewed them about 15 years after they divorced, and 75% of them said that when they look back, they regret having done that. in the 25% were happy, but the 75% were very, very unhappy. Now, in terms of that statistic, do you should give it a chance, an opportunity to maybe rekindle passion, to have a probationary period, maybe sign a new contract, and in that time there isn't an overall improvement besides the issue of infidelity in terms of the happiness at home, then they could consider taking that definitive step, you know.
I think I am an istikhara warrior. My father raised me with that. And one of the criteria, he says, is when you do istikhara and you make a decision, never look back and regret that decision, because it's as if you are questioning Allah's guidance for you. And since istikhara is a strong sunnah, I often say, ask Allah to guide you in navigating this very traumatizing emotional roller coaster that you're going through. Having said that, I know when we feel betrayed, because it's supposed to be till death do us part. We're in this for life, and it's either a life sentence or inshallah, we live together till we reunite in Jannah, inshallah, whichever one. I feel once you committed to marriage, you never committed to having a fear that there may be infidelity. When you agreed and you said, I do, that was never part of the deal. So of course, when this kind of experience comes out and you discover your spouse isn't being faithful, like you said, there is so much anger and the emotional roller coaster. And I think it's important you calm down and start asking yourself, what can I live with? What can I not live with? While you are praying, while you're asking Allah for guidance, for clarity, while you are watching your spouse, talking about it, seeing whether they will come clean and show signs. It depends really, and it's subjective to the individual. Everybody is different. Everybody is unique. Some people will say from the onset that infidelity is a deal breaker. For me here in Nigeria, I am so frightened to see the number of women who know their spouses are not faithful to them. And they say, well, as long as he pays the bills and takes care of the children and allows me to maintain my lifestyle, well, if I can't satisfy him, let him satisfy himself. You find some people can live with it. So it really is subjective to the individual. And I think part of the problem today is the fact that society is trying to make it commonplace. It's a sign of the end of times where wrong is made to look okay or acceptable. But it's really something that is going to be up to the person to decide. But I will use Allah as your guide, as your compass and your personal qibla in making such a huge life-changing decision. And don't do it when you are in the heat of anger. Don't make a decision like that when you are really, really emotionally charged, because it's hard for you to have clarity and focus and be objective at that time. So I think that's the best advice I will give. Really submit it to Allah, but don't ever regret your decision. Once you have followed the rules and guidelines of something like istihara, don't ever look back 20 years or 15 years later and say, maybe I regret what I did. No, you've done the right thing. If you asked Allah to guide you and you felt your heart was no longer in the relationship, or you felt, let me move on, let me open a new chapter of my life.
You know, I don't think we can overemphasize the issue of istikhara, I mean, there's nothing better than to surrender to Allah. Say, Ya Allah, this is the pain I'm going through. Only you can guide me. And I think if that's one message that people who go through these challenges embrace, eternalize, and internalize, it will make a huge difference. And the other issue I want to speak about is the whole issue of emotional infidelity. What about that? Some people feel that emotional infidelity is just as bad or worse than physical infidelity. And how would you define emotional infidelity, Maryam?
Well, I actually often I say there is physical zina There is zina of the eyes, there's zina of the tongue, there's zina of the touch. And unfortunately, social media has not made it any easier now, because we commit a lot of zina of the eyes and zina of the hand, in the sense that we use our fingers to be unfaithful to our spouse. You find one or the other couple at 2 a.m. is chatting with somebody, a member of the opposite gender, at 2 a.m. And I often ask, would you allow that so-called social media friend to come into your living room with your spouse asleep in bed upstairs and have that same conversation with them? Then why are you online? Why are you talking to someone that is not your mahram? Even if they're your mahram, what the heck, if you're married, what are you doing talking to someone of the opposite gender at that, about anything? Even work, it's not proper. We have to be very careful. Emotional infidelity, I'm living with you, but I've emotionally checked out. This is how I describe it. I'm not sure, Uncle Idris, if you have another take on it, but I feel I'm in love with somebody else, but I'm here with you physically because you're the one I said I do to. But I have emotions for someone. I keep thinking about that person. I keep saying, I wish I shoulda, woulda, coulda done that. And here I am. I've settled for you. That is how I see emotional infidelity, that you're just not loyal and committed to this person, to this relationship, and this covenant that you're signed up to. But I also have to emphasize, we have to be careful with what we say to each other, to people that are not our spouse, on social media, in WhatsApp chat groups, and so on. We have to be careful with what we see. That is also another form of zina, what we allow when our eyes wander, whether it's people we look at and we don't lower our gaze, or we take a second look, or whether it is while we are scrolling or doom scrolling on social media and what we linger and look at. This could be a source of fitna that allows shaitan to go to work and, create a bigger problem for us, for our lives, for our relationship. So we have to be very intentional in guarding our relationship jealously and protecting ourselves and the relationship from this kind of trouble.
What you're saying is so right, because I see also emotional infidelity like a precursor. It often leads to the physical. Because this is taboo, so you think in your own mind it is innocuous, it is innocent, my wife doesn't know about it. But because you're investing your heart, you're confiding in the other person, there are no boundaries, you are really betraying your spouse, because the things that you're sharing with the other are things you ought to be sharing with your spouse, and you yourself would know that there is a huge difference.
Uncle Idris, I want to give you, sorry to cut you short, a quick example of something that happened that my husband and I had to deal with. This woman kept saying she cried out for help to her husband, that I'm doing my best to look good for you. I'm crying out for intimacy and you ignore me. I dress well, I look good, I take care of the house, I do all my responsibilities. You never compliment me, you don't see me. So she would go to work looking miserable, and a colleague of hers started to say, oh, you look so beautiful. And she started to find that need of being seen is being fulfilled by a colleague at work. Another day she comes to work and he says, oh, your eyes, you look a bit dull. You don't look happy. I hope you're okay. And she started to, lean on him to say, oh, this is what I'm going through. And he would say, someone as beautiful as you? How is he crazy? And it started slowly with subtle, words. And then it became validating her, telling her how beautiful she is, and then giving her advice. At first, he sounded like he was trying to make sure, talk to him, write a letter to him, tell him that this is what you need from him. And she thought he was rooting for the success of her marriage. And she slowly started to fall in love with him because he was giving her what her spouse wasn't giving her. No justification whatsoever. At the end of the day, they ended up in bed. And that was when she reached out to me saying, I don't know what to do. And you can imagine. And that is where emotionally, and it goes exactly with what you said, Uncle Idris, you find emotionally you are falling in love with someone else. And yet the person who you're living with, the person you're married to, is bankrupt of what he needs to do to make it happen. So you have to find a solution to it. Otherwise, it can lead to something really, really dangerous for your relationship. Sorry to cut you short.
No, alhamdulillah. Jazakumullah, Maryam. 3 segments have gone and you are listening to a program, Say It Like It Is. And we are talking about a very sensitive topic of infidelity. And I think the nuggets of wisdom that Maryam has shared can help us to navigate these waters, to ensure, inshallah, that we're not guilty of this very, very serious sin or crime. We'll be back immediately after this break. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Say It Like It Is. And we have come to the last segment. You know, Maryam, alhamdulillah, I think we have spoken at some depth, I think, on this topic of infidelity. I think the viewers can take back some messages. Those that are guilty of it, perhaps it will rekindle the passion for their spouses. They would turn to Allah. But the question in the last segment is, how can we ensure that our homes are such where there is love, affection, where there is communication, and there is no need for any of the spouses to look for validation outside the home?
Well, first of all, we need to understand that it's not compulsory to get married in Islam, but it's highly encouraged. And once you choose to go into this covenant, it's not just between you and your spouse, it's you, your spouse, and Allah. So now imagine signing a contract with your Lord. What does that mean? If you're going to sign any contract with your fellow man, you're going to read the fine lines, the nitty-gritty. You might even involve a lawyer to ask them to look at, am I missing something? Why? Because you may end up in court. But we keep forgetting we could end up in Allah's court. And at the end of the day, we will have to answer to him for what we did or what we didn't do. Allah has rules and guidelines of marriage, what we are meant to do. And that is our roles, what each spouse is meant to do, our unique roles. And we also have rights and obligations. We have to learn that. We have to learn that with the meticulousness that we do our wudu and we do our salat. I often say what's lacking in marriages today is we focus on reciting the Quran, memorizing, pronouncing properly, doing wudu, hajj, umrah, and all the other rituals. But we forget that this act of ibadah, which fulfills half of our ibadah, half of our faith, if we get it right, if we fulfill our obligations, we neglect this. We look for khushu in prayer, but we don't do khushu in our marriage. So first we need to know, what does Allah expect of us? Wallahi, if we start by fulfilling our rights and obligations to our spouse, I believe right there you have the foundation for a healthy marriage, because amongst the rights our spouse has over us is to be loved, intimacy, halal intimacy, compassion, to guard the relationship jealously by protecting our spouse and being a garment for them, keeping their secrets, dignifying, and so many things. Showing respect is a right your spouse has over you. If both spouses do that, you find love grows, intimacy grows, and there is room for this beautiful garden, which hopefully you will put a fence around and guard jealously, to flourish. One tip that I have shared with many people, which I learned from a scholar, he said, look at everything outside your house as a buffet of, if you are a man, of women out there. They're a buffet. And you go out, you will see this dish, this dish, this dish. He said, but if you are at home and you eat to your heart's content before stepping out, it doesn't matter whether it's filet mignon, lobster, crab, oysters, beef bourguignon, whatever it is, you're not going to feel like eating it because you have satisfied yourself at home. So he advised, satisfy your intimacy needs at home. Speak to your spouse, share your wishes, your expectations, your fantasies, and try everything in your possible best to fulfill that before you go out, before you step out.
How important is communication in the marriage?
Where you express your fantasies to your spouse so that you are able to both fulfill your fantasies before you step out. Because if you are satisfied at home, it's highly unlikely that anything will entice you when you step out of the home, because you are full. You've filled your You've filled your cup, and hopefully temptation will not be so high. You need to work on your taqwa. You need to be God conscious and God fearing. Work on your iman. If you have a desire to please your maker, you will not do what makes him upset, what will displease him. And that includes not betraying the contract of marriage, not engaging in zina, and obviously the fear of what it will do, the domino effect it will have in the relationship, in the marriage, in the lives of your children. It can shatter. You will ruin everything. Is it worth it at the end of the day? You have to be asking yourself these questions and constantly working on looking good for each other. Understand it's not just meant to be one spouse doing all the heavy lifting. You will find many cases. The man complains, the woman doesn't look good. She's not taking care of herself. She's not kept. But you might find one where the woman does everything right and he's got a second trimester potbelly, and yet he's still saying she's not good enough for him. It's like she also wants you to look good for her. She also has her own needs, and it has to be mutual. The best advice I will give is, if you're both committed to making this relationship work, talk. And never stop talking about your needs, your wants. Have a strong love for Allah and hold on tight to Allah's rope. And continue to ensure that you are fulfilling that need before you step out of the house. I think that advice that scholar gave is a very, very good advice for men in particular.
No, alhamdulillah. Maryam, I must say it's always a joy to interact with you and your beloved husband. Give me my salams also. And you have such a beautiful marriage. It's a wonderful example for people all around us. But I think the overarching thing that you mention in all of this is the taqwa, your relationship with Allah. If your relationship with Allah is a strong one, that in itself will ensure you do not do what is wrong. So I look forward to more interactions with you. And before I forget, my beloved wife, Ruxana, has asked me to give you salams. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Your shushu bambalina. Absolutely.
Right. So there it is. We've been talking to Maryam Lemu from Nigeria, a relationship coach. And Alhamdulillah, it's such a joy to listen to her. And she has got, Alhamdulillah, the benefit she had of her beloved father, Sheikh Lemu, and Sheikha Aisha Lemu. May Allah grant him high status in Jannah, and also a dynamic scholar in her brother, Nuruddin Lemu. So, inshallah, my prayer to all of you, my beloved brothers and sisters, is for us to take the institution of marriage seriously, inshallah, that Allah is pleased with us, our families are pleased with us, and in the end, I like to believe your wife will say, when she looks at you, my darling, I like it. So, alhamdulillah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.